Welcome back to this week's conclusion as we break down the kitty cats from the NFC South. This is 8 divisions in 8 weeks on the Talking Sunday podcast. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Talking Sunday handle. And what is with all this Panthers gear? No, you silly little podcast listener. I'm not a Panthers fan. But I almost was when my dad bought me the sweet Kerry Collins jersey back in 1995. Can you imagine if I ended up being a Panthers fan? My whole life would be different. So now that that's explained, jump on board because this train's headed to Pound Town. Last season was definitely one to forget for Panthers fans. Starting the season 0-2, quarterback Cam Newton was sidelined with a season-ending injury. After countless attempts at a comeback during a Thursday night football game in Week 2 against the Bucs, it was evident that something was still seriously wrong with Cam Newton's shoulder. Surprisingly, under backup quarterback Kyle Allen, the Panthers went on to win 5 of their next 6 games, improving the team's record to 5-3. Was the undrafted quarterback from Houston possibly the guy? Not quite. Over the next 4 games, Allen went on to balance out his stat sheet, throwing 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, causing the Panthers to go on a 4-game losing streak. This started to bury the Panthers in the NFC playoff race. After 9 seasons in Carolina as the head coach, Ron Rivera was let go in a mid-season firing form. This had been in the making for a long time, ever since owner David Tepper bought the team back in 2018. With new ownership usually comes big changes, and Tepper has made it pretty clear that his vision was to move towards a more analytically driven team. With Rivera being more of an old school ground and pound while playing tough defense kind of guy, the writing was on the wall almost regardless of the outcome. But let's not get short-sighted here. Just because Rivera doesn't fit in with Tepper's vision doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad coach. Riverboat Ron is still one of the better coaches in the NFL. He leaves Carolina as the winningest coach in franchise history with 3 NFC South championships, 4 playoff berths, 1 Super Bowl appearance, and a Coach of the Year award back in 2013. He quickly found a new home as the head coach of the Washington Redskins, and all Skins fans should be excited as that franchise needs all the help they can get. With interim head coach Perry Fewell closing out the season, the Black Cats packed it up, won 0 games for the rest of the season, and finished with a sad 5-11 record. With big changes needed to be made this offseason, now was the time for Tepper to strike. Tepper got right to work by gutting almost the entire coaching staff and hiring one of the most sought-out college football coaches in Matt Rhule. Rhule made his chops in college football when he was able to take 2 failing programs and turn them into winners within a 3-year span. He started by taking a 2-10 Temple Owl football team and turning them into a 10-4 bowl team, tying for first place in the AAC. He was then offered a job in the Big 12 with the Baylor Bears, taking them from an awful 1-11 to capping off a Sugar Bowl appearance against the Georgia Bulldogs after an 11-3 year in just 3 seasons. Once Rhule was installed, he quickly got to work in hiring his coaching staff and brought in one of the youngest and brightest offensive-minded coordinators in college football with Joe Brady. This is by far my favorite hiring that the Panthers made during the offseason. Brady has the potential to be the actual mastermind behind any offensive success that they may experience in the near future. Brady is only 30 years old and has incredibly picked up valuable coaching experience through some of the best coaches in all of football. He was a grad assistant under Penn State's James Franklin's team that went to the Rose Bowl with players like Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley. He then went on to learn under mastermind Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints as an offensive assistant for 2 seasons before becoming the passing coordinator for the national champion LSU Tigers. The 2019 LSU Tigers, led by number 1 overall pick Joe Burrow, went on to absolutely shatter college football records. Brady helped catapult that offense from number 38 to number 1 in just 1 season, and we completely saw Joe Burrow transform right before our eyes. Before Brady came onto the scene, Burrow wasn't even thought of as a top quarterback, throwing for a measly 16 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, ranking out as only the 50th best quarterback in college football. Once Brady took over the passing offense, Burrow became a sensation overnight, throwing for a whopping 60 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. Now, Rhule has also brought along his coordinator, Phil Snow, to call the defense. Snow has stuck by Rhule's side, following him everywhere he's gone since the 2013 days with the Temple Football Owls. Did you think the rebuild stopped with just the coaching staff? The new Wrecking Crew took a bulldozer to the roster, getting rid of a ton of veteran players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And these just weren't the bad players. Most of them were still pretty good. James Bradbury, Mario Addison, Eric Reed, Gerald McCoy, Vernon Butler, Bruce Irvin, and Dontari Poe were some of the biggest names let go. But perhaps the biggest loss for the Panthers, and quite honestly the NFL, was linebacker Luke Kuechly. Kuechly was an absolute monster during his short career, as he shocked the world by announcing his retirement at the age of only 29. Unfortunately for Kuechly, we saw him miss significant time with concussion-related injuries on 3 separate occasions. Tearing an ACL or breaking bones is one thing, but your brain is nothing to mess around with, and we started to see a pattern developing with Kuechly. It's a sad day in the NFL community to lose a legend like Kuechly, but long-term health and mental health will always be more important than playing football. So with that, thank you, Luke, for leading by example. You really cared about the game and dedicated your craft by putting it all on the field, and it definitely doesn't go unnoticed. And it didn't just stop on the defense. The purge continued on the offensive side of the ball. Fed up with the antics and concerns about future health, Carolina cut longtime starting quarterback Cam Newton. Surprisingly, Newton was ultimately replaced with Saints backup Teddy Bridgewater. Barring a preseason injury, it looks like Bridgewater should be the team's starting quarterback come week 1. Now entering the season at the age of 35, the Panthers cut longtime tight end Greg Olsen, but Carolina was able to replace him with another pass catcher by signing wide receiver Robbie Anderson from the New York Jets. Anderson should add more speed to a roster that is already loaded with speed with DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. After finishing the season 5-11, the Panthers were absolutely primed with the number 7 overall pick in this year's draft. After they gutted the entire side of the defense during free agency, we knew their primary focus would be on the defensive side of the ball, and we weren't disappointed. With their first pick, Carolina nabbed one of the best prospects in this year's draft with the selection of defensive tackle Derek Brown out of Auburn. Brown ranked out as the 5th best defensive tackle in college football last season and has been consistent throughout his career. An absolute mauler and disruptor in the middle, Brown is the perfect starting piece en route to building this new defense. Brown has that rare combination of being ridiculously strong and athletic that can get to the quarterback and stop the run incredibly well. Now, I'm not ready to compare him to the likes of an Aaron Donald, but the potential is certainly there, so I would keep my eyes on this big cat. The Panthers continued to add along the defensive line with their second pick when they selected defensive end Yetur Gross-Matos out of Penn State. Gross-Matos led the Nittany Lions defense by accumulating 9 sacks last season and ranked out as the 32nd best pass rusher in college football. I really like what they're doing here. Building your team from the trenches out is the key to success in winning football games in the NFL, and they got a pretty good edge rusher with this pick. Finally, the Cats selected safety Jeremy Chinn from Southern Illinois. Although Chinn played in a weak Missouri Valley Conference, his tape and athleticism really stood out. A rebuild, especially in its first year, is never a good recipe for instant success, so I'm not expecting too much from the unit right away. But this doesn't mean these guys are going to be a bunch of little kittens for teams to grab free wins. The offense is still loaded with talent and speed in the likes of Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and newly added Robbie Anderson. Now, I know Teddy Bridgewater doesn't excite most fans, but he's a great game manager that rarely turns the ball over and limits mistakes. With Matt Rhule and Joe Brady now calling the offense, it wouldn't surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise you, if this offense all of a sudden seems legitimate. Rhule may get the credit if the offense flourishes instantly, but Joe Brady will be the wizard behind the curtain. Once they inevitably lose Brady to a head coaching vacancy, I'll be curious to see how Rhule proceeds. Even if the offense flourishes, the defense will ultimately be the problem. Although filling out the defense through the draft, the team is super young and time to get acclimated to the speed of the NFL will be inevitable. This will almost feel like the Arizona Cardinals of last year when Cliff Kingsbury took over the team. The offense was able to score points for that team, but the defense simply couldn't stop anybody. But it's not all doom and gloom. This is a new beginning for Carolina Panthers fans. And if history tells us anything about head coach Matt Rhule, we might just see this team on the edge of a playoff run come year 3.